There is something all guitarists, you, me, believe that is very simply put just a lie. You could call it a delusion, you could call it a myth. If you're being dramatic, you could call it original sin, but it's just simply not true. And today we're going to show you what that original sin, what that myth, what a delusion is. And we're going to bust that myth using the science of marketing, of all things. Hi everyone, welcome back to the Ministry of Guitar. I'm Utkarsh coming to you from Singapore. Now, what is this myth, this lie, this original sin that all guitarists believe? It's a very, very simple one. If you watch the recent video with Tim Pierce, Paul Reed Smith, and Rick Beato, the proof that this is a lie is as clear as it can be. Yet, even after watching that video, I bet that many people will go away still believing in that lie, that myth, that original sin. And what is that myth? The myth is that a guitar built in the US by Gibson or Fender in the 1950s or 60s, something like this is not a 1959, this is a copy, but something like that, just imagine a real 1959 Les Paul or imagine a pre-CBS Strat, that is objectively a better guitar, not just a better, but the pinnacle of the guitar compared to a guitar built, say, in Indonesia in 2025, like the Paul Reed Smith Silver Sky SE that we saw in the video with them. That instrument, that $600 or whatever, $800, whatever the price is now, Silver Sky, is inferior to the 1962 Strat, pre-CBS Strat or whatever. This everybody will tell you, everybody believes it, and frankly, even I kind of believe it. But the reality is that it's just not true. So I'm going to divide this video into two things. One is, of course, I'll talk about why it's not true, which is part you all know. But more than that, what is the reason that you and I believe this? And the reason that you and I believe this, and even after knowing all of this, I would still probably want, keeping aside the values, I would still probably want a 1962 Strat. There are some very, very deep human and very, very deep marketing reasons why you and I believe this. Now, why is it not objectively not a better instrument? Let's be very, very straightforward about this. Production quality, quality control standards, general standardization of mass manufacturing, the techniques that you had in the 1950s and 60s versus the techniques you have in 2025 are not comparable. They are dramatically different. Working as I did in a company that manufactures a lot of things, just seeing how manufacturing standards evolved over a 15-year duration where I was working, let alone a 70-80-year duration, you will know that the way factories operated in the 50s and 60s versus how they operate in 2025, it's dramatically different. It doesn't matter where the factory is located. The iPhone is, of course, made in China as an example, right? And China is pretty much high-end manufacturing. So comparing the output of a 2025 factory with a 1958 factory, it's objectively not even comparable. Now, there is a very good reason why 1950s Les Pauls and 1960s Strats got a great reputation. It is because rock and roll exploded in the 1960s. And because of that, obviously those companies enjoyed some level of growth, and there was a lot of interest in the guitar market because previously musical instruments were not in the forefront of popular culture. I mean, there were violinists, there were pianists, but the musical instrument wasn't a poster child for popular culture the way the electric guitar became. And that was the opportunity for the companies to then get corporatized, which means that Gibson got bought over and Fender got bought over. And when they got bought over, what happens when a company buys over another company or a fund or something buys over another company? They try to extract profit because they have spent money to buy this company. I've spoken about what happened with Reverb of late. You can check out that video. So what happened is, come the 1970s, the companies that have bought over Gibson and Fender are trying to extract profit. So they don't want to increase the price point, but what they have to do is they have to reduce the cost, which is where you have all the cut price solutions that got into, that they started doing all the cost cutting, slab board to veneer board, multiple piece bodies, whatnot, general quality standards going down. So because of that, the guitars in the 1970s were so terrible compared to the 50s and 60s, is that at that point in time, suddenly the older guitars, the second-hand guitars, the future vintage guitars got an amazing reputation. And so the myth started getting born. But the myth doesn't really end here, because It's not enough for there to be a decline in quality standards for there to be for there to create a myth that endures for 50 to 60 years like this has. To understand why all of us still believe that the 50s Gibson Les Paul and the pre-CBS Strat or Telecaster is the best thing since sliced bread, you have to understand three marketing principles. I've talked about this in other videos, but let's get right into it. What is it that makes the guitar industry tick? And it boils down to three basic marketing principles and one basic human principle or human truth.
The closest shave is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Mach 3.
The first principle that I want to talk to you about is halo. HALO, halo. Halo is the principle by which you have a hero product for any company, and that creates a halo effect on other products. I'm going to use a very simplistic example from a company that I used to work with. For those of you who don't know, the reason why I'm giving you this marketing breakdown is I used to work in marketing for 15 years. And towards the latter end of this particular stint, I was heading marketing for one of the most iconic brands that you may have heard of for certain countries in this part of the world. So let's just take that brand for fun, right? Gillette. Gillette is, of course, known for its, the best technology that it brings from into the world of shaving, right? You had the Mark III with the 3 blades, and you had the 5 blades. A lot of people think it's called Mark V. It's not. It's called Fusion, so on and so forth. And at any point in time, you have the confidence that the best shaving product, regardless of the cost, the best razor is being made by Gillette. The implication of this is that Gillette doesn't only make the expensive razors. If you go down to cheaper razors made by Gillette, say disposable razors, use and throw razors, or even cheaper ones, the country that I come from, India, you have Gillette, which still makes those old straight, what's called a double-edged razor. You may recognize this, that maybe your granddad used to use. The thing is, because Gillette makes the best product, there is an assumption of quality and performance from all its products, not just the most expensive one, but even the cheapest ones. So if Gillette sells a $20 razor or $25 razor, the $5 razor that it's selling or the $2 razor that it's selling is also receiving that halo that Gillette makes the best products. This is a very simple marketing principle. You'll see it across the board. You'll see it in the car industry, for example. One of the reasons why, if you think about, let's say a good example, let's just take Volkswagen. The Volkswagen Group. One of the reasons why they created this particular car, the first 1,000 horsepower car, the Bugatti Veyron, is to show what the Volkswagen Group could do. That they could make a Bugatti Veyron, right? 1,000 horsepower car, an iconic car. And because of that, everybody knows that this is the engineering prowess of this Volkswagen Group. And as a consequence, your humble Volkswagen Golf.
People are people, so why should it be?
You and I should get along so often.
Volkswagen Golf is a product of the same company that makes the Bugatti Veyron. So you have the confidence that, hey, I am getting, even though I'm buying a 20,000 pound car or whatever it might be, it's the same company that has the capability to make that £1 million car. Now, what does Halo depend on? Halo depends on having a hero product, and from that hero product, the brand equity halos down on the other products. In the case of the guitar industry, this really happened by accident. Fender and Gibson did not set out to make a halo product. It just happened. It just happened that the 1959 Les Paul became a weapon of choice for so many rock and roll or rock bands in the 60s and 70s. You have so many, whether it's Eric Clapton using it on Beano, Jimmy Page using it in general, so many more. And similarly for Fender, of course, the Telecaster made iconic through the Rolling Stones, the Strat made iconic through Jimi Hendrix, Pink Floyd, and the list goes on and on. I don't need to tell you, you know all of this. So the point is, accidentally, a hero product was established. The 1959 Les Paul, the Strat, the 50s pre-CBS Strat, the pre-CBS Tele. Now, for the longest time, Gibson and Fender did not realize the power of this Halo product. In the early 80s is when they started realizing, or rather Gibson started realizing, when it started trying to reissue this Halo product, the 1959 Les Paul, the Burst, 58 to 60 technically, right? That's when they started realizing that, hey, we have a product that is iconic. But what they had not realized is the impact that that product had had on their business, that because that hero product was associated with excellence, was associated with the movement, the entire company, all its products received a halo as a consequence, right? That is the reason why they could try out different shapes, different experiments, and all of the products had some chance in the marketplace because they were branded a Gibson or they were branded a Fender, because Gibson and Fender were the ones who made those iconic products. Look around you in the world, you'll see this across the board, right? Any company, any brand that you can think of, there's probably a hero product that established the brand equity, and then a lot of products are receiving a halo. Now, this halo doesn't extend indefinitely, particularly in very functional technical products. We'll get to this whole aspect of functionality later in this video. But the base of a company, of a brand, is set by a hero product. So hero halo is the reason why Gibson and Fender, even till today, these hero products have not just become heroes. Now they've turned into myths, they've turned into legends, they've turned into $1 million guitars in certain cases. If you look at, just take both Gibson and Fender, their business model entirely depends on the halo from the 1959 Les Paul, the pre-CBS Strat, the pre-CBS Telecaster. You see it across price points. Fender is using the halo from the Telecaster or the Strat, from a $100 Bullet Strat to a made in Mexico, to a made in Japan Strat, to a US whatever, Ultra, whatever it's called now, professional Strat, to a basic custom shop Strat, to a master build Strat. All across price points, you're seeing the halo of the pre-CBS Strat. And similarly for Gibson, you can spell out the products for yourself. Interestingly, Fender and Gibson are the main ones where they have such a powerful halo from such a powerful product, because the products are no longer hero products, they are halo products. So understand this, that a big chunk of the appeal, of the success, of your apparent perception of excellence above any product, not just the guitar industry, is built on the halo of a hero product that has left an impression either on you or on the world in general. Now, this brings me to the next principle. And it's called anchoring. What is anchoring? Anchoring is setting an expectation, and because of setting expectation, your behavior changes. Let me explain this in a more simplistic way. I'll use an example that was actually used all the time in marketing trainings that I did and I attended. All right. If you're selling, and sorry, I keep going back to the world of cars. If you're selling, say something like a Rolls Royce or a Bentley, $200,000, $300,000 car. If you take it to what would be your logic? What's the better place to sell it? Do you sell it in a car show, or do you sell it in a yacht show? Think about it for a second. Initially, you'd be like, of course, I'm going to sell it in a car show. That's where it's a car, right? In the car show, you have a Rolls Royce or a Bentley, which is one of the most expensive cars that you can get. It's significantly, maybe 10 times, 5 times more worth more than other cars in the show, and it looks very expensive. One big myth that people have is that rich people or people of any ilk, they just, there comes a point where people just don't care about money. I know some very, very rich people, they care about every penny. The thing is, it just makes the Rolls Royce look a little bit excessive, a little bit frivolous, right? And of course, a lot of us know that there's a lot of part sharing that happens even with most expensive cars or cheaper cars, just as a business. So this kind of exposes it. In the context of a yacht show, where yachts may cost millions of dollars, suddenly a $300,000 Rolls Royce doesn't seem that expensive. The expectation is set in this particular setting that you are talking about millions of dollars worth of product, and then in that context, suddenly it doesn't look that expensive. We see this with property as well. Just to use another example, real estate. What you see sometimes is when you have new real estate being launched in an area, and new real estate is typically a bit more expensive because your developers need to recoup costs. There's a lot of marketing that goes into building an image for that new real estate. You see, when there is new real estate and new developments in an area, you would expect that, hey, there is more supply of real estate in the area, hence prices should go down. Right? Supply demand. More supply means there is more supply for the same demand, so prices should go down. What really happens is prices go up across the board usually. We see this a lot in Singapore, for example. And the reason why prices go up is that suddenly there's an anchoring of the new price, the price of the new launch, the price of the new building versus the existing building. Suddenly your existing building looks cheap because the new building is quite expensive. So more demand, a lot of demand comes there, and then the pricing goes up. Now, this doesn't exist in isolation, just so that we don't make this a universal theory of real estate. There are other factors, but I just want to give you an example of when you set the expectation of pricing. Think about this also in the context of when you're given three options. When you're given three subscription options to a platform or three plans, what you'll notice when you look at the plans, you'll have a high plan that is really expensive. You'll have a low plan that is really shitty, doesn't have much features, and you'll have a middle plan that seems to be the sweet spot. It is no accident that this middle plan seems to be the sweet spot. It's by design, because you're anchored to the price of the high plan, and that seems terrible because it's too high for you. And then using a smart intersection of features, you kind of design it so that the middle one just looks incredible value. Why does the middle one look incredible value? How much is it worth to begin with? You have no idea. You have no idea how to price it. Your pricing expectation is kind of set by the fact that is how much the high plan stands for. Now, what does this have to do with guitars? Because we seem to have taken a tangent. Everything. Because what has the guitar industry anchored itself to? What is the significant driver, or rather setter of price in the guitar industry? It is the same hero products, the same mythological, legendary products. It is the vintage guitar market. And the vintage guitar market, because it has such low supply, because there were very few guitars built, fewer of them survived in good condition. So the vintage guitar market is where you have $100,000 guitars, $200,000 guitars, and so on and so forth. So again, if you are comparing a Gibson custom shop to an Epiphone, you're like, why the hell am I paying $6,000 or $7,000 for something I can get for $700? All right. In theory, if you really think about it, the Gibson custom shop of today is more comparable to the Epiphone of today than the Gibson Les Paul of 1959 to 60. It's very simple, because the wood that it is getting made of is coming from today, right? The wood that they were using, I'm just trying to be very, very particular about it, but the wood, the metal, everything that they were using, as much as Gibson custom shop has made an entire separate tangent altogether of getting closer and closer to 59. Reality is that two guitars are getting made in 2025 and one guitar was made back in 1960. The world, regulatory environment, everything has changed so dramatically that you're actually closer to the guitar getting made in 2025, regardless of what the differences you think are, versus the guitar made in 60. Yet Gibson does such a wonderful job of creating this false equivalence, almost I would say, between the R9 and the 1959 Les Paul through featurization. We'll get to this featurization in a second. That is going to be my next point. Through featurization, they do such an incredible thing of making the 1959 Les Paul the benchmark, or the vintage guitar the benchmark, that in the context of vintage guitar pricing, suddenly a Gibson custom shop looks like good value. Sometimes they've been very blatant about it, right? You think of things like the collector's choice, where they're so-called replicated exactly vintage guitars, even though one very simple example is that vintage guitars contain Brazilian rosewood and modern guitars simply can't, for the most part, right? But nonetheless, they created this illusion of false equivalence with these exact replicas. They do this all the time. I have a Slash double neck, which is supposed to be an exact replica, through relicking of the Knocking on Heaven's Door guitar. So what Gibson and Fender do, Gibson more so, is that they use the anchoring of the vintage guitar pricing, create a false equivalence between their new guitar and the old guitar through featurization. I'm going to explain featurization in a second. And then they use that to justify the pricing and create a certain value for the company. Right? So anchoring is everywhere. You see this across the board. Next time you're choosing something, even in the store when you're choosing something, the retailers, you will realize that retailers keep some very expensive brands and you wonder who the hell buys them. Some people do, but generally it is very smart strategy to have something expensive so that it makes the middle price product look cheap in comparison. That was anchoring. Let's get into the third principle, featurization.
Hello, ladies. Look at your man. Now back to me. Now back at your man. Now back to me. Sadly, he isn't me. But if he stopped using lady-scented body wash and switched to Old Spice, he could smell like he's me. Look down. Back up. Where are you? You're on a boat with the man your man could smell like. What's in your hand? Back at me. I have it. It's an oyster with 2 tickets to that thing you love. Look again. The tickets are now diamonds. Anything is possible when your man smells like Old Spice and not a lady. I'm on a horse.
Featurization is something that is so, what should I say? You don't realize it, but it's really all around you. I want you to start about by thinking of soap. Back in the day, just maybe say 70, 80 years ago, you had soap. That was it, right? You just had soap. You used it on your face, you used it on your hair, you used it everywhere. Then somebody realized that, hey, and this is, by the way, how segments are created, how market segments are created. Why the hell are people using the same soap on the hair and the skin? Because they're different. Why don't we separate the hair, the skin, the soap being used on the hair? Then instead of buying one product, people will buy 2 products. Hence, shampoo was created. After that, it got into, hey, why do you have the same soap for the face and the body? You should have something for the face and something for the body. Oh, face wash and body wash. Right? You see where this is going? Think of it. And then it gets further. Oh, why do you have the same men and women using the same thing? You should have, because their skin is different. They are different, by the way. I know this, having worked for what I did. They are different. Why do the men and women use the same thing? So then you have male body wash, female body wash. And then when we get to facial skincare products, then that's the whole ballgame. The entire skincare industry is based on constant featurization. You need a cleanser to clean your face. You need a scrub to remove the dead cells. You need a toner to prepare your skin. You need so on and so forth. Featurization exists all around you. Any segment that you look at, where you see that there's a differentiation that has been created, that is literally featurization. It's all over the place. Now, what does this have to do with guitars? What guitars have done is they have created this featurization. They have trained you and me. For example, a great example is plain maple versus flame maple. There was no such differentiation, say, in 1958 to 60 when the original Les Paul was being made. Some guitars had like a plainer top, some guitars had a more flame top. Today, of course, you pay extra for the flame top. If you think of a brand or a company like PRS, you have a normal top, then you have a 10 top, then you have a wood library, or rather a artist grade top, and then you have a private stock grade top. 4 grades of maple. Even Gibson went that way. They started grading the maple from A, maple, AA, AAA. These are all made up human terminology. Not to say there aren't differences in the how the maple looks, but this is a false featurization. Then, for example, the wood in itself, you have normal wood and then you have hand selected wood. Think about it. If you were going to tell me what the difference between a custom shop Gibson and Epiphone Les Paul was, you'd say the mahogany on the Gibson is better. Why is it better? Oh, it's selected, it's lighter, it's more resonant. Mahogany is mahogany. The fact that we're differentiating it so much is a human construct, right? Similarly, let's talk about the rosewood, right? Same thing. So let's keep woods aside. Let's just talk about the materials being used for the frets, or the materials being used for the electronics. When was the last time you checked what material and for being used for the electronics on your refrigerator or on your television? Are you going and checking that this television has stainless steel, whatever, right? You are not, because you have not been trained so by the marketing industry or the companies marketing the product. So what I'm trying to say is all of these differentiations that you create in your head of what differentiates an Epiphone Les Paul versus the Gibson custom shop. And there are differences. I've talked about this in my other video in terms of amount of time needed to spend on the product. And by the way, creating these differentiations is not free. For a company to actually hand select uh, for a better piece of maple, or to choose indeed a better material for certain aspects of the guitar, is indeed more expensive. So it's not, I'm not saying companies are doing this for free. There is an inherent cost to featurizations, to companies to create two separate pieces of packaging for male and female, for two separate pieces of packaging for, and two different formulas for face wash and body wash. There is a cost to it. So I'm not saying that this is all fake. It is certainly not fake, but it is at the end of the day a net positive to the company, because the amount of money they invest in the featurization is way lesser than the amount of money they earn from the consumer value that is created by consumers paying more or buying more. So featurization is a big aspect of how Gibson justifies aspect 1 and aspect 2, right? We talked about the hero product, the 1959 Les Paul, or the pre-CBS Strat or Tele. Then we have the false equivalence that is established between this hero product and the product that you can buy today, and to some extent cheaper products as well. And this is done through featurization, where you're trained to know that, for example, you're trained to know that pre-CBS Strats had Brazilian rosewood or so on and so forth, right? Back then, they were just using rosewood. All of these things came later. They basically used what was available. Now, we've got the three principles here. We've got halo, we've got anchoring, and we've got featurization. But I would be remiss if I did not mention the main thing, the main driver of the guitar industry. And to understand this, you have to understand why people buy anything at all. I've talked about this in my other video, the previous video that I made. I've made many videos on talking about the marketing principles, but I'm going to repeat myself here in case you haven't seen that. What is the reason someone buys a product? There is either a functional job to be done. There's a job you need to get done. You need to hammer a nail, you buy a hammer. I'm making it very basic, but it's true. You need to get from A to B, you buy a car, so on and so forth. Maybe you could say you take an Uber. That also delivers the same functional job to be done. But there's a functional thing that you need to do. That's one reason people buy a product. The second reason why people buy a product is an emotional need. And the second one can often be much more powerful than the first one.
Advertising is based on one thing: happiness. And you know what happiness is? Happiness is the smell of a new car. It's freedom from fear. It's a billboard on the side of the road that screams with reassurance that whatever you're doing, it's okay.
What is an emotional need? An emotional need could be going back to why, for example, women spend so much on skincare. There is an emotional need to look more beautiful, for example. And there are all of these reasons why this particular product will make you look more beautiful. I'm oversimplifying skincare dramatically, but I'm just trying to just illustrate it with a rather crude example for you to understand the difference between an emotional need, which may create a lot of functional justification, right? So the emotional need will often be justified functionally. Like in the case of skincare, it is justified as, oh yes, this particular product has this particular ingredient from the mountains of the Himalayas or whatever it might be. Now, let's talk about emotional need in the context of the guitar industry. The thing is, both Gibson and Fender have often gone down the path of functional needs. Think of the most famous example of the 2015 Gibson lineup, where they introduced the now ill-fated robot trainers, not tuners, not trainers, robot tuners, and a slew of other features. It bombed. Gibson made the mistake of thinking that people are buying Gibson because they want a better guitar, they want a better functioning guitar. It's a different matter that the robot tuners were flawed from a design perspective, but it's not the only time that Gibson tried to make a more functional guitar. Think about the high performance series that it made with a better neck shape, better compound radius, so on and so forth. Coil splits, all of that. The reality is that Gibson's success has never really come, at least in the last I would say, since the 50s or the 60s, Gibson's success hasn't really come from making a better guitar, from making a functional guitar. Gibson hasn't really been in the business of serving a functional need. Because if you think about it, the functional need to have an instrument that can make music, that can be done at any price point. That can be done at very cheap price points. You don't need a $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 guitar. The main purpose, and this is still a very powerful purpose, and this is still a very deep need that Gibson has been, and Fender, and a lot of guitar companies have been in the business of fulfilling, is an emotional need. To understand how powerful an emotional need can be, I want you to take a detour with me to a company called Singer, ironically started by Bruce Dickinson of Iron Maiden, started by his cousin. There's a company called Singer, Singer Vehicle Design. They make the perfect Porsche 911, because there is, much like you have the myth of the 1959 Les Paul, you have the myth of the air-cooled 911, the perfect 911. And what they do is they take cars, second-hand cars from the late 80s and early 90s, the particular generation of the Porsche 911, the last air-cooled Porsche 911, and I would be doing a great disservice to say they soup it up. They don't. They are artists. They do a really good job. They completely rebuild the car, but of course it's still the same car, still registered according to the original second-hand car. But they redo the engine, redo the body, redo the upholstery, redo everything. Right? Now, can you buy a car that is faster than a Singer Porsche? Easily. Any ordinary Tesla is faster than the Singer Porsche. Can you buy a car that is more luxurious than the Singer Porsche? Easily. Any standard Mercedes S-Class or BMW 7 Series or whatever is more luxurious. Can you buy a car that technically handles better, can take the corners better than a Singer Porsche? You can buy a cheap, relatively cheaper, smaller sports car like what you get with Alpine. I'm giving examples, car examples here, so don't hate on me if you don't know about cars. Just know that you can do all of these things easily. Yet, Singer has a waiting list of over 3 years, and each of the cars costs $2 million, $3 million, can cost several $1,000,000 depending on what you do with it. So, what explains this? Why do you have a car that is functionally worse than a $20,000, $30,000 car that you can buy easily off the market, whether it's speed, whether it is luxury, whether it is whatever actual performance? Why is it that car? Why are people paying millions of dollars for the privilege?
5 a.m. No one else is on the road. The sun has not come up yet. There's a romance to sitting in the car, just starting it up, hearing that flat six fire, turning on the headlights, and knowing that I have a couple of hours of absolutely nothing in front of me other than the scream of this motor.
Well, much like there's a spirit of rock and roll that you cannot recapture, the spirit of being a certain age, the spirit of maybe seeing Led Zeppelin live, the spirit of maybe being in a Laser Floyd concert, maybe actually being there at Woodstock. There's something you cannot, it's a money can't buy thing. Much like you have that, you have the same thing for the car industry. You have that drive that you took, you have that car that you lusted after when you were 9 or 10 years old. You have that perfect vision of a car that existed in your head, but then when you actually went and bought a Porsche 911 from that period, wasn't exactly what you expected. But then Singer makes exactly what you expected, the product of your dreams. Right? What I'm trying to say is that it's a very, very deep emotional human need, the fulfillment of a dream. Whether it's a fulfillment of a dream car, whether it's a fulfillment of a dream life, a fulfillment of a dream guitar, whether it's a reminder of a certain moment in time. If you are now, when you were young, you had no money and you couldn't do anything. Now you are in your 50s or 60s. And you have more money than you could imagine when you were young, but you're no longer young. You can no longer recapture what it was like to be 17 or 21. That is a very deep emotional need. So, what is the conclusion of this video? It is not to say that, 1950s guitars are terrible or 60s guitars are terrible and all of guitarists are fools for believing in it and all of that. Not at all. What I'm trying to say is that know that objectively as instruments, even quote-unquote low-priced, affordably priced guitars being built to 2025 manufacturing standards are objectively as good, if not better, instruments than vintage instruments that are often, they are unreliable. They have some quality defects. There's a lot of variation. So know that objectively, just because you can buy a great guitar for $800 today doesn't mean that it's a bad guitar. You've just been trained to think that, $800, whatever that is in purchasing parity terms, cannot get you an amazing guitar. It can. It absolutely can. But, so know that, but it's okay to have dreams. It's okay to indulge yourself. It's okay to have dreams, rock and roll dreams that haven't been fulfilled. It's okay to connect back to your childhood through a guitar, or connect back to your youth, or have a certain romantic notion of what life should be like and what is part of that perfect life. I mean, we are human. We don't live life objectively. So while objectively you can know that you can get as good a guitar as you'll ever need for $800 to $1,000, you can absolutely go and burn $10,000, $15,000, hell, $100,000 on a vintage guitar if you can afford to, and it gives you that deep satisfaction. So you can win both ways. You can get a great guitar at a price that you probably never could before. At the same time, you can indulge in your dream if you really feel like it. Just don't fool yourself into thinking that a vintage 1959 Les Paul is any better, or rather, let me make it more particular to this video. A pre-CBS Strat is any better than a PRS Silver Sky. Or a 59 Les Paul is any better than a good quality Epiphone Les Paul that you can buy today. The Epiphone and the PRS SE are as good as the vintage guitars. Let's be clear. All right, folks. I know I'm going to get a bit of hate for this, but I don't care. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you next time.